welcome back to the channel. We're here with the G80. As you know, car's an amazing car, but it's not perfect from the factory. So it has some fitment issues like sunken in wheels. There's a huge wheel gap, which really bothers me. So we're gonna go ahead and tackle the spacers first. I have Steve, who's one of our techs here. He does a lot of development and everything for us. He's gonna be measuring everything out, figuring out what spacers work, so we can get rid of some of the sunken in look. And then later on, we're gonna be doing some AST lowering springs on the car. I'm working with them directly, so we're doing some development to see if the test springs they sent us are gonna work, so we'll be back to that later.
All right, so we're starting with 4 different sizes here, 10 mil, 12 mil, 15 and 18s. We did some measuring beforehand, and we've got about a 2.5 millimeter difference between what we need in the front with what we need in the rear. So we're gonna start off with a 15 millimeter in the front, 12 millimeter in the rear, and see if that's right in the middle of where we want to be, or if we can go a little more aggressive. So the purpose of the anti-seize here was to provide a little bit of a shield between the wheel spacer and the hub or rotor face, because a lot of times the two materials will corrode together and it becomes extremely hard to remove the wheel spacer. So this just sort of makes it so when you're ready to pop that wheel spacer off, it should slide right off. But also something to note here, it looks like they've made some voids to reduce the amount of contact patch. So that also helps in conjunction with you using the anti-seize. After each time we bring it down, we're going to roll it back and forth so that the suspension can settle back down. And now let's look at the fitment. I would say we're 2 mil too far for my liking, but it's close. The springs will continue to settle, so we might actually be right there. We are actually just outside the fender. So how about we just go ahead and try the 12s in the front then, right off the bat. Let's do our roll back and forth real quick. That looks a lot better with this particular set of tires, because if you guys look here, these Pirellis have a very large bead that overhangs, so not every tire is going to have that. So if we were to change our tires here to let's say a Michelin has a lot less poke from the wheel, then we wouldn't be flush anymore. So right now we're just working with the setup on the car that it came with, and so I think we're gonna end up on 12 millimeter spacers for the front. All right, so this is what we were talking about with the fender liner. Obviously, the more flush you have your tire, the tighter it's going to hug the fender, and if you have anything back here, your tire is going to start rubbing. So we're going to take a look at what's behind here to see if there's anything behind it, or if we can sort of modify it to get a better fitment once we lower the car. Nope, completely empty under there. All right, so it doesn't look like there's anything behind there, which is gonna be really nice as far as getting a nice fitment without the worry of rubbing, except for this fender liner. So, but it looks like we should be able to modify that. In the front, we were gonna do 15. We decided to go down to a 12. And so with that 2.5 millimeter delta between the front and the rear offsets, we're gonna try a 10 in the rear. So 2 millimeter difference. And hopefully that gets us pretty close. I think with this wheel and tire setup, this is gonna probably be really close. All right, so I think since we're on the alignment machine, I'm just gonna pull these pins so when we come down, the suspension should settle without having to roll the car. So instead, I'm just gonna give it a little bounce. That should be good. Oof. I think we're really close. We might be sticking out just a tiny bit, but I think it might be almost identical to how much the front is sticking out. And so we are currently at 12 millimeter front spacers, 10 millimeter rear spacers. Stock ride height with the 20-inch or 20-inch rear wheels, 20-inch front wheels, and wrapped in Pirelli P0s, which is how the car came. So our next step is to do some lowering springs, and then we're gonna come up with a with another set of spacers for when the car is lowered, and a little bit of a tweak in the alignment. So now that we figured out our wheel spacer specs for stock ride height, we're going to do some lowering springs. We are working with AST with developing lowering spring kit for this car, and this is our beta 1 version. We're going to install them, see what the drop is, and then do some test driving to see how we like the spring rate, and then relay that information over to help them with the development. So what we're doing in order to get the information is we're taking pre-ride height measurements. This is the way I like to do it. We'll put a little tape with a mark and get our initial from the bottom of the wheel across the center line of the wheel to the mark. This will give us just our baseline, doesn't matter what the number is, and then we'll just take that number, subtract the next number from it, and that gives us what the drop is on the front and the rear. All right, so we just finished removing the left rear spring and installed the new spring. Just to give you a side-by-side on height difference there. And then obviously there's slightly different spring rates that we're still sorting out, but this is our first set of springs to test. So let's see how it goes. We're gonna go ahead and we're gonna loosen up this. We're gonna pivot about this bolt. And we're just going to loosen it so it swivels about the rubber grommet instead of flexing the rubber grommet there. And then we're just going to disconnect the damper and the upright so that we can swing this down and grab the spring out. Two things we got to transfer over is the top bushing, which you'll see this spring end meets there, and the bottom bushing where the spring meets there. And then we've got this dowel for the bottom. and that goes to the outside. So this spring is gonna sit in there. It's gonna fit up top into the hole, just like that. And then we're gonna bring the control arm up and we're gonna line up this dowel with this hole, and it falls right in. So one thing I forgot to mention is before we lower our control arm in the back here, we want to make sure to disconnect the ride height sensor, because if not, we'll overextend it and likely break it. So that's just this 110mm nut holding the linkage to the control arm. Springs are fully installed. Let's come down. Let's take a look at where we're at. Now we can take our measurement with the lowering spring to see how much that came down. So we're just gonna go just like we measured it the first time, from the bottom of the wheel to our mark, and we are at 25 inches. So exactly a 1-inch drop. So it looks like a 1-inch drop is like pretty nice here, and the wheel spacers that we had for the fitment at stock ride height look like they work really well here too. So we still need to do an alignment, adjust that toe, and then we'll see where our camber's at. And but for now, let's move on to the front. Let's try to get that front gap out of there. To install our front lowering spring, we're gonna remove our front damper assembly, and then we're gonna use our spring depressor to remove the original spring, and also to install the new spring. So first thing I'm gonna do is disconnect the sway bar linkage, unplug some of our sensors, and then we're gonna remove the pinch bolt in the back so we can slide the upright down, and then we'll unbolt the 3 nuts on top. So off camera, we took the damper off, put it on the spring depressor, removed the original spring, replaced it with the lowering spring. Now I'm just reinstalling the damper back into the upright and reversing all of the steps that I mentioned at the removal process. All right, so we're all done with the installation here. Let's bring the car down and let's look at where we're at. All right, so this finalizes our first beta set of springs from AST. We ended off with a 1-inch drop all the way around so far. We are pretty happy with the way it looks now. We're gonna give it at least another week to settle before we finalize our alignment. Really looking forward to get the car out to a clean culture show tomorrow, March 20th. If you guys wanna come check out the car in person, we're gonna have our PSI booth there. I hope you guys enjoy the video. Stay tuned for our next set of mods, and hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, comment below what you thought of this, and what you'd like to see in the future.